In a village tucked between the rolling hills and the edge of the vast forest, there lived a man named Elias, known by few and admired by even fewer. Elias was a poet, but not the kind of poet the world expected. His poems didn't fill grand libraries or win famous prizes. His words were not about conquering kingdoms or grand loves. Instead, he wrote about the quiet beauty of nature, the slow rhythm of a life well lived, and the simplicity of everyday moments. He lived alone in a small cottage at the edge of the village, surrounded by a wild garden of flowers, shrubs, and ancient oak trees. His life was quiet, filled with long walks through the forest, hours spent writing at a simple wooden desk, and evenings spent by the fire, reading poetry by others. The villagers often saw him wandering alone or sitting in the meadow, staring at the sky. To most, Elias seemed peculiar. He was a man who had no great ambitions, no desire for wealth or fame, and the villagers often spoke of him with mild amusement. "Elias," they would say, "he's always off in the clouds, scribbling nonsense. No one will ever remember his words." They mocked his quiet nature, seeing him as someone who lived in a world of fantasy, too far removed from reality. They couldn't understand why he didn't want to become a merchant or a farmer or a blacksmith, why he didn't strive for anything grand. But Elias wasn't bothered by their opinions. He knew his heart was where it should be. His words, though small and seemingly insignificant, were his contribution to the world, a way to capture the fleeting beauty of life. To him, there was a great depth in silence, in the simple rhythms of the world around him, and he wanted to share that with anyone who might listen. One day, the king announced a grand competition to find the finest poet in the land. The winner would receive a lavish prize, and their name would be etched in history for all to remember. The village was abuzz with excitement, and the people urged Elias to join the competition. "You should enter, Elias," they said. "Who knows? You might be the one to win." But Elias, true to his nature, hesitated. He didn't seek fame or wealth. His poems were not meant for glory, they were meant to reflect the world as he saw it. Yet, seeing the enthusiasm in the villagers' eyes, he finally agreed to submit a poem. On the day of the competition, poets from across the kingdom gathered in the grand hall. The king sat upon his throne, surrounded by nobles and scholars. Each poet took turns reading their work. Long, eloquent verses about grand heroes, powerful kingdoms, and epic struggles. Their words were carefully crafted, designed to impress and awe. The crowd applauded, and the king smiled, but it was clear they were all waiting for the most magnificent of poems. Finally, it was Elias's turn. The room fell silent as he slowly walked to the front. He did not speak grandly of victories or kingship. Instead, he read a simple poem he had written one morning while watching the sunrise. The sky, the color of dawn, so soft, so bright, a bird takes flight, its wings a fleeting sight. The wind whispers through the trees with gentle care, and for this moment, all is calm, all is fair. Elias finished reading and stood quietly, his hands clasped in front of him. There was no applause, no excitement. The crowd shifted awkwardly, unsure how to respond. The nobles looked at each other, confused by the simplicity of the poem. The king, too, seemed puzzled. He was expecting something grander, something that would stir the soul with visions of battle and glory. But as the seconds passed, a strange thing began to happen. The room grew still. It wasn't an uncomfortable stillness. It was peaceful. For the first time, the people in the room began to notice the quiet beauty of the world around them. The rustling of the trees outside, the cool breeze drifting through the open windows, the soft light streaming through the stained glass. They found themselves reflecting on their own lives, on the small moments they had missed, the beauty they had overlooked. The king, though initially unsure, began to smile. He recognized something in Elias's words, something that was timeless and profound, even if it wasn't flashy or extravagant. The people around him began to murmur, speaking softly about how Elias's poem had touched them in ways they didn't expect. When the time came for the king to announce the winner, The grand poets with their ornate verses expected to hear their names. But to everyone's surprise, the king spoke of Elias, the quiet poet, who had shared with them not a story of a hero or a battle, but the beauty of the world they so often ignored. Elias has reminded us, the king said, that the most powerful words are often the simplest. The crowd sat in stunned silence before erupting into applause. But Elias, ever humble, simply bowed and stepped back. He didn't seek their praise. His joy came from knowing that his words had made a difference, no matter how small. He had shared his quiet wisdom with the world, and that was enough for him. As the years went by, Elias's name became known not for the grandness of his poetry, but for the truth in his words. People from far and wide would come to listen to him, not for tales of kings and battles, but for the quiet reflections of life. And though he never sought fame or fortune, his words lived on, carried by the winds and the whispers of those who had listened.